Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the gold standard run of Dark Souls. This is a self-imposed challenge run I'll be doing of the entirety of Dark Souls Remastered. The game launches this evening, so I thought it might be nice to have this video to go over the rules I've come up with, and then I'll end with a few thoughts about the remaster and the changes to it, and why I'll be using this version for the playthrough. I'll be uploading the Let's Play on this channel throughout the weekend. It's been a hell of an academic year, but I finally have a few days to take it easy with some souls, and I'm super excited for it. And I'd be happy to hear some feedback on the run as I go through it. I think it could be cool if some of you played the run with me and then shared your experiences, so let me know if you do that, or if you make edits to my list and implement your own changes and how the experience was for you. Now, I will explain my inspiration behind the gold standard run before I go over the rules. But before I do that, I'd like to take a look at my old one. This is actually the first character I made in my first Souls experience. Oh boy, 28 resistance. Oh man. Yeah, and the tiny bean ring. Yeah, I was completely duped with that. I totally thought it would give me health restoration, and it did not at all. That was definitely let down. Once we got here, these were other characters I made, and what's this? Corwin? I have no idea who this character is. Is he a friend of mine? Yeah, I couldn't tell you. Sorry. So, yeah, I tried playing this the other night, and I was going to record myself with it, but it ended up being super long because I was trying to multitask, and it was just kind of a disaster. But I'll intersperse a few clips from that nonetheless, just because there were a few funny things that happened. So, let's get started. The gold standard run. So there's going to be a couple of objectives with it. The first is that I'll be doing an evaluation of the difficulty of Dark Souls, with particular interest towards the boss battles. Because I've heard a lot of people talk about this conversation of like just how difficult is Dark Souls, and the bosses specifically, and ranking them. And sometimes it's like, well, what are the best bosses? And then, oh, well, what are the bosses that are just, particularly difficult? And I feel like the opinions are pretty mixed overall. So part of this run is not just to make things really, really difficult on myself, but to also make it so that we get a little bit of a even playing field with each of the bosses. I'm going to be leveling up my character and changing equipment and things like that, but it's going to be much less than I think you ordinarily would do. And it's going to be very controlled and sort of like spread out throughout the whole thing. Part of how that's going to work is by having the rules, I'll evaluate the bosses a bit more accurately, I think. But I'm also going to be sharing personal memories. I'm going to try to attempt to recall my initial impressions and responses from my first playthrough. And that's going to be more of like, not the bosses, but the kind of surrounding areas, and like, oh, like, yeah, I took this tip, or no, I didn't get that. That was too subtle for me, kind of thing. Like the Red Drake, the bridge, it's all burnt or whatever. Things like that. I'm going to try to like recall and bring them to mind. Another part is to share the run with other people. So if you want, you can actually look into the description, and I'm going to have all the rules posted there. There's a couple that aren't in there, but that's because they're up to you to decide where they would go or what they would look like your class, for instance. So I included it in my list because I was making a build and I wanted to plan everything out. I've actually been working on this build for months, believe it or not. I wanted that information on a document for me. So the version that you have is a bit more palpable. You can take it and you can kind of just work off of it. And as we go through the playthrough, I'll update it, especially at the last video. I'll make sure that it has, all the things that I did specifically in there, so you can kind of see a comparison. And then the last thing is I kind of want to do a little bit of a role play with it. I want to do some throwbacks to like D&D or classic games like Dragon Warrior or Dragon Quest on like NES or Zelda. And I'm talking about the original Zelda, because Dark Souls is very much inspired or an evolution of those games. and that's an argument for a whole nother day, which I won't get into, but I say that because these are the things that influenced my choices when I designed the run. So sometimes it's like I'm doing a thing because I want to evaluate the difficulty of something, but other times I'm doing it because I want to make it feel like Dragon Warrior or something like that. So I hope that makes sense. And with that done, here are the rules for the gold standard run of Dark Souls. The first one is called the Master Key Condition, and it goes like this. If you choose the Master Key, you may only use it to gain early access to items, but not bosses, mini-bosses, or smiths. You must discover those via the conventional route designated below. And that'll be the last rule of the conventional route, which is sort of set up. But we'll get into that later. Basically, there's going to be thresholds of when you unlock things in the playthrough, and that's where this rule comes into play. Rule number 2, no helpful summons. Invasions are optional. I don't think I'll be doing very much PvP. I'm going to kind of see how it goes. Certainly for the initial part of it, I won't be doing PvP. I'm going to turn the online off just because I want to make sure that the run is going smoothly on that initial trajectory. But at some point, I'll probably turn on the online feature, and I'll be open to invasions from time to time. I just don't want to do a whole lot of it because it's really going to depend on time. As I go through it, if it seems like it's taking a while to get things done, then I'm going to just continually turn it off because I want to make sure the PvE is getting most of the attention. But if it seems like things are moving swimmingly, then I'll go ahead and try to get a little of that action in there. Rule number 3, restrictive item usage. Choose 5 items. These slots must never change throughout the playthrough. Pick carefully. Some items are more useful in certain scenarios than others. So basically, you would take the 5 item slots that you have, and then whatever you put them in, that's what it's going to stay as. And for me, I have it outlined. I'm going to go with the Estus. That's pretty obvious. Purple Moss, the Silver Pendant, and so on. Those kinds of things. I'm not sure how good of a rule this one is going to be. And that's the other thing I was supposed to mention earlier. This is partly a test, right? Like, I'm not going to be going through... I haven't done this run before. This is the first time for me. So I might be making very minor edits as I go through it. Or maybe even big edits if they're necessary. But I'm going to try to refrain from that and just follow it to the best of my ability and then see what happens when I reach the end. Because sometimes you make a rule and then you find out later on down the road, like the Silver Pendant was something I kind of forgot about, and then I was like, oh, well, what about that? I mean, essentially that would fall into this category. And then I was like, well, I guess I'll take the Silver Pendant with me. But then it seemed like kind of unfair because it's kind of a quest item, and it's like the purpose seems to like limit how many items you get to use, but it shouldn't be related to quest items either, so I don't know. And there's a couple caveats to this rule as well. They are only 1 HP restorative item allowed. However, you may always use humanities while at bonfires for liquid or kindling. A maximum of 5 soft humanity at any given time. Okay, so let me unpack that real quick. So basically, you choose like an Estus, you choose humanity or divine blessings or whatever. Like, you pick your healing item and then that's it, is kind of the idea behind that. Mostly, it would just be, are you going to play with just Estus or just humanity? Because I thought that might be interesting to do a run where you can heal as much as you want, but you can only use, humanities. You can't use the Estus. But then I was thinking, like, well, I just want to use the Estus. I didn't want to overcomplicate it. I've already got a lot of complicated rules in here. But, yeah. Also, the maximum of 5 soft humanity, that's kind of a general thing. That's not super specific, because that's mostly for if you're going to use a chaos weapon. And I have never really used chaos weapons all that much, so I don't know how they work. I was thinking in my head it would be overpowered if you could get 10 soft humanity and use a chaos weapon for this particular run, but maybe not. So that's a rule to consider. And a couple other things in here. Soul items and the like may be used while at a bonfire or a blacksmith. You have to use soul items actually by the blacksmiths, and I'll explain that in a little bit. But here are some of the other points, and they're just here because they're a bit different. They kind of need to be addressed so you don't take the rule too seriously. For instance, Firekeeper souls are allowed to be used to upgrade the Estus class. I figured that was fine. No resins. Other buffs are allowed since those require far more investment from the player. Like, I wanted you to have to actually level up, an attunement slot, and then, get the intelligence for, like, magic weapon or something like that. I didn't want you to have to just, I can just buy a resin and then use that perpetually. So I was like, no, cutting that out. Ammunition is also unrestricted. I mean, you can have as many arrows as you want. I don't think that's a big deal. And then lastly, soul items, you'll use those in front of blacksmiths, actually. And then humanity, you can use at bonfires, so that way you can kindle it and things like that, which I kind of explained. So basically, like, if you're at a bonfire, you can use any items you want before you kind of, like, head out, is essentially the gist of that. Alright, now we're getting into the good stuff. So, number 4, level up from bosses. So after every boss, you must level up +3 to any stat or stats of your choice, but no more or less. And you must do this as soon as possible. So, if you tally it all up, you get about 25 bosses. I think there's 26, but Gwyn doesn't count because you won't be able to level up after you defeat him. And I also included 2 mini bosses in there as well. And I did that in part because, one of them is pretty difficult, and there's also roleplay reasons as well. But basically, I just wanted to have a nice controlled environment for leveling up your character so that it was consistent. Because sometimes I'll go, 3 bosses, and then I'll level up like 12 levels or something. And I just kind of wanted to minimize that a little bit and make it a steady progression. And it also gives you a cap early too. You won't reach 120 by the time you get to Gwyn. In fact, you're going to be like you're going to be in your mid to late 80s. Number 5, equipment upgrade clause. So, in addition to needing Titanite, you must also consume 1 soul item with every upgrade you make to your weapons and armor. There are about 100 plus soul items in the game, so use them wisely. So basically, let's say you want to upgrade your short sword, you go talk to Andre, and it's like you're going to give him the Titanite. If you upgrade it to a +1 short sword, you need to consume 1 soul item. Make sense? So there's a couple notes to go along with this. The lowest value item of these is the Soul of the Lost Undead. Since these can be farmed, you may only use them for upgrades requiring Titanite shards. You may not use these soul items for large shards, green shards, twinkling demon, so on and so forth. You can only use them for that lowest value. Another note on the boss soul items. Boss soul items can be used for anything. They're going to be worth 3 upgrades apiece, but they are required for maxing out any and all pieces of equipment. So if you want a, +15 sword, you're going to need to spend a Titanite slab and a boss soul. If you want, an enchanted weapon at +5, so you're going to need, a blue Titanite slab, you will also need a boss soul for that. Basically, that's how that system's going to work. But also, you can use the boss souls for other things if you want. You can obviously use it to make boss soul weapons, in which case that weapon's going to require 2 boss souls if you're going to max it out. But you can also use it as a regular upgrade to upgrade, armor or just whatever you want. But if you do that, it's going to be worth 3 upgrades. I thought that was a nice kind of compromise. So that way you can use a boss soul item and then you can upgrade your weapon to, from 0 to +3 and give it a nice initial boost. So if you map it out, you can essentially plan when you can use your boss souls that way. There's only 10 you're going to be able to use, so keep that in mind. There is technically 12, but when you fight Smog and Ornstein, you only get 1 of their souls, and also Gwyn, you won't be able to use his soul. Rule number 6, ring requirements. So pick 2 rings to wear for the duration of the playthrough. You must acquire these rings as early as possible. Rings can only be chosen from the selection below. And your options are the blue Tearstone ring, the red Tearstone ring, the lingering Dragon Crest ring, Ring of the Evil Eye, Speckled Stoneplate ring, Tiny Bean ring, or the Eastwood Grain ring. And the reason it's set up like that is because you may temporarily swap out 1 or more ring slots for these rings when the situation calls for it. So here are additional rings you can use, but they don't have to be part of your 2 staples. These are other rings because some of them are quest related, and that's where these come in. But I also included the Rusted Iron Ring, the Covetous Gold Serpent Ring, the Covetous Gold Silver Serpent Ring, and a Ring of Sacrifice and Protection. You may use one of those. I figured that would be nice. And then, of course, you get the Orange Charred Ring and Covenant of Artorias, which you'll need for sure. Anyways, pick 2 rings and stick with those. Rule number 7, learning magic. So this is probably my favorite rule because it's a throwback to Dragon Warrior on NES, where you would level up and gain spells. So that's where this one is coming into play. And also, I wanted to try out a handful of spells and miracles that I don't typically use. Ones that are kind of seem like they would be decently viable for PvE, but just or maybe even PvP. But I just never really tried to utilize them very much. And also, I had to keep the stat requirements for them pretty low, or as low as possible, because while, yeah, I'm okay with making a PvE character, like, I also, like, didn't want to invest, like, this exorbitant amount of levels into, you know, faith and intelligence when I knew I wanted to have, like, a decent weapon. And I didn't want to make this, like, overpowered sorcerer, just, like, you know, soul spear everything. So, learning magic, it goes like this. Magic spells are learned via leveling up, a la Dragon Quest or Dragon Warrior. You may wish to revise the spells learned to more appropriately fit your build. So, don't take this, you know, to heart as like you have to follow this layout, but this is how I did it. At level 9, after every, like, 3 to 6 levels, you gain a new spell. So, at level 9, you'll learn Heal. Level 12, you'll learn Soul Arrow. Level 18, Magic Weapon. 24, Cast Light. Level 30, Undead Rapport. And so on and so forth. All the way up to level 60, you'll get the Power Within. So you'll have at least 20 levels where you'll have all the spells available to you. And so, like I said, you can change up what spells are, or miracles or whatever are in there. You could base it all around miracles or something like that. It doesn't matter. I'm going to be doing all 3 just because I deliberately picked ones that were not going to require a huge stat investment, and then that way I could do a little bit of everything. And I'm going to try to utilize some of the spells that I don't ordinarily work with, but we'll see how it goes. I can't believe I blew that. What an error in judgment on my part. Yeah, victory. Holy shit. Alright, we'll just wave. That's probably the only victory you're gonna see me have. I'm really glad I got that on footage just because I'm such a terrible PvPer. Awesome. That got my heart right up. But like, I love the PvE. I do in most games, but like, PvP is just my one weakness, if you can call it that. I'm really not very good at it. That went really well. That was awesome. It was a good fight. I think he was trying to get that backstab, and then I was like, nah, man. We're getting to the end now, so rule number 8, loadout tiers. So, equipment is broken up into tiers that gradually unlock as you reach certain thresholds within the game. These thresholds are derived more from the roleplay, thus it is up to the player to decide which moments will correlate with what item acquisition. Nevertheless, the goal is to reduce weapons and armor to a steady, even pace. When you gain new equipment, the upgrade should be similar in form and function as the previous, as if your equipment is evolving. And there are 2 notes with this. You may not use the Sunlight Maggot. Additionally, helms in general are considered optional. And the reason for that is largely because there's going to be Cast Light you can use. This is kind of a minor thing, but sort of like if you wanted that restriction, like basically I tried to keep myself from like cheating and being like, oh, there's a Sunlight Maggot, I could just use that. I was like, well, I might as well state it in the rules so that way I can see it. The other thing is that while equipment slots can be thought of as power-ups being earned at designated points throughout the playthrough, armor should be considered a single slot. Thus, all 4 armor slots are equivalent to a single right-handed weapon slot. So basically it works like the original Zelda, like, you know, you gain a new sword or a new shield, or you gain like the blue ring or the red ring, which would change your tunic and increase your defense values, new armor. So essentially I translated it that way. So at certain points in the game, you'll come to like an area where there's like basically a roleplay event, and then you'll gain a new weapon, a new shield, or a new set of armor. And I have them set out over what I'm doing for my character, but it correlates with the next rule, which is the order that you have to do everything in. Rule number 9 is this designated boss route to follow. So you must follow this route, and then after Orenstein and Smaug, you may break order until all that remains are the DLC bosses and Gwyn, which must both be fought last. So basically, the first boss you're going to fight is the Asylum Demon, right? Then the second boss is going to be the Taurus Demon, and then the third boss is going to be the Moonlight Butterfly. And the reason I'm doing that is because of a multitude of things. That's what I did on my first playthrough. I defeated Moonlight Butterfly before I did the Gargoyles, and also I thought I would give you a perk or a new equipment item upgrade, whatever you want to call it, prior to fighting the Gargoyles, because the Dark Gargoyles are going to be much tougher than the Moonlight Butterfly. And then I made it up as in, you'll get the chain set through this. So you'll get the chain armor, and I think you'll find it on that corpse, or the petrified Andre lookalike after you defeat the Moonlight Butterfly. So basically, in addition to there being an ember there, you'll also find like the chain armor set, and it'll be like da 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 da, and you kind of unlocked it, and then you can equip it and be like, okay, now I've gotten this threshold complete. But you could also change it up. I mean, you could do it the same way as in you talk to Andre after you killed the Moonlight Butterfly, and then he's like, oh, like, looking like it's pretty tough out there. How about some armor? Like, and then, you make this role play where you purchase armor from him, or he gifts it to you, or something like that. Or, like, you defeated the Moonlight Butterfly, and that was a favor to him, and so, if you kill the Moonlight Butterfly for me, like, I can do X and Y, or whatever, questing type stuff. So that's what I mean. Like, you have to follow this order of the bosses, and then after Orenstein and Smaug, you can kind of change it up to your liking. But then you can designate the points at which you're going to acquire certain things. And for me, that's kind of like the trajectory I'm going with. I'll get like the chain set after the Moonlight Butterfly, and then I'll upgrade to, from the East-West Shield, which is what I'm going to start with, and I'll upgrade to the Heater Shield after I defeat the Capper Demon, right? So, basically this does a couple things. By fighting the Moonlight Butterfly before the Bell Tower Gargoyles, it means the Moonlight Butterfly will be slightly tougher, and that's a particularly easy boss, so it'll give that one kind of a boost. And then it'll give the Bell Tower Gargoyles, a little bit of make them a little bit more manageable when they're ordinarily pretty tough, right? But the other thing is, going back to rule number 8, is sort of this like unlocking equipment, weapons, shields, and armor, and so on. You could do it however you like, but I think it's best explained by example, so I'll kind of explain a little bit. Like, I'm going to start off with the East-West Shield, which is just a wooden shield, doesn't have 100% reduction. I figure, like, that's what you probably should start out with, but basically you can choose an equivalent of that shield, like just some kind of wooden shield, whatever you want to go with. And then at some point you will unlock your shield upgrade, which in my case is going to be the Heater Shield. And that makes sense because it looks like the East-West Shield, but it's obviously performs better. And then, going a little bit further into the game, I'll upgrade even more to get, like the Crest Shield. And I'll get magic resistance, and that'll be helpful. And so basically it's like that. That's the trajectory of it. And I've outlined them by class. And so I'm going to try to get this chart to look okay in the description. It might be kind of confusing how I have to lay it out, but I'll try to do my best. And basically, you'll be in a tier, and then in a tier there's going to be a couple of different weapon choices that you can decide upon. So if you have the East-West Shield, you can upgrade either to the Heater Shield, the Hollow Soldier Shield, or the Caduceus Kite Shield, something like that. I don't remember how that one's spelled. I have it down here in my notes, but hell if I'm going to go look up how to pronounce it. So basically, you'll have a couple different options as you progress through it, and ideally there would be like a certain class that you're fulfilling. So let me put it this way. tier 0, what you start off with will be the peasant, right? You start off with the short sword, the east-west shield, and the hollow soldier set, or the hollow warrior set, or any combination, whatever you like. It doesn't really matter. None of it's any good. Then in tier 1, you'll become the pilgrim. And so you'll have the choice of upgrading from the short sword to either the broadsword, the Astora straight sword, the long sword. And, you know, I explained the shields, and then armor will be the leather set, the chain set, or the adventurer set. And basically, they go together. So when you get, like, the chain set in the paladin, and then you go into tier 2, or excuse me, when you get the chain set as a pilgrim, then you go into tier 2, the paladin, that chain set will evolve into the knight set. Just like the east-west shield should evolve into the heater shield. Like, it would make more sense if you did the wooden shield and then into the hollow soldier shield, because they look similar. You know what I'm saying? Like, there should be, like, this natural, organic evolution to them. For the most part. It's not a hard and fast rule, but that's kind of how I have it set up. So for me, like, you know, I'm doing the Astora straight sword, the heater shield, and the chain set. Those three go together. And then in the next set, it'll be like the Silver Knight straight sword, you know, the knight set, the crest shield, or whatever it is. But then other players might have gone with the adventurer set, and the adventurer set will evolve into the brass set, and like the leather set evolves into the hard leather set. You see what I'm saying? So you don't have to follow that as strict as, well, I'm not even going to be following it that strictly. I'm going to break it just a little bits here and there. But basically what I'm saying is, you know, you can make it more of a thematic that you're, you know, or a theatric, I guess, that you're going to be following certain color schemes or design elements to make your character look like there's just sort of like they're taking their weapons into the smith. Like, they had a short sword and then it's been reforged to become the Astora straight sword. That would kind of make sense. Or like the east-west shield, but then it was like plated with armor. So it's like, it's literally that progression. But like I said, you can kind of stray away from that if you just kind of want to be like, nah, more about the stats, and you want to just be like, I'm going to go this weapon, and that one, or whatever. But yeah, I think that about covers it then. So I have a handful more thoughts I could share about the remaster specifically and all the changes that they made or didn't make. But I think it could be surmised best just by saying, you know, there are two camps when it comes to remasters. There are the people who see a remaster as an improvement, and then there are people who see the remaster more as a change. Essentially meaning that if you see it as just an improvement, it means better graphics, fixed bugs and glitches, and quality of life, you know, adjustments and that kind of thing. But it wouldn't actually change the game. But if it's like, you know, a new experience, then it stands to reason that you would change it up and you would add something fresh to it. And there's a lot to say about, you know, the different platforms that it's on, but I kind of feel like most of that I can just touch upon it as I'm playing, if the conversation seems to arise. And most of the main changes I was concerned about had to do with the bosses. Like, that was what I was, like, if we were going to change anything, it really came down to, you know, making sure that Seath can keep up with you so you don't beat him to death, you know, just by whacking his tail, and, you know, giving Pinwheel more health. Those were the changes that I was most concerned to see implemented in terms of, like, actually changing the game and not just improving upon it. But it sounds like that really wasn't the direction they were going for, which is going to work out for this playthrough, to be honest, because that means I'm playing the original version, but the performance will be much better. And to couple with that, I haven't played it in about a year and a half or so, so I'm kind of vague on a few things. And that means I'll be sort of in that noob state. So I think all of that will mesh together nicely. If I were to play the original, I mean, I could, but I feel like it would be best just to have the higher performance rate, specifically the frame rate, because, man, it was really sluggish when I did the recording just for this video, and I could notice, and I'm a console gamer typically, so I don't usually notice frame rate drops and things like that. It just kind of goes over my head. But when I was playing this, I was like, oh my goodness, like it's like I could barely keep up with what's happening on screen. So I feel like we're going to get a nice level playing field, which is perfect for the run that I'm going for. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you when I upload the start of the gold standard run for Dark Souls. See you then.